With her newborn triplets clutched to her chest and death circling like vultures, Sarah Blackwood watched in shock as the Apache warrior, the very man she'd been taught to fear, waded through the rising floodwaters toward her, defying everything to save them from certain death. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. The wind howled through the canyon walls like a spirit in torment, carrying with it the distant scent of rain and the promise of a storm. Swift Arrow stood motionless on the edge of the ravine, his lean figure silhouetted against the crimson sunset that blazed across the Arizona sky. His dark eyes, sharp as an eagle's, scanned the landscape below where shadows deepened in the growing dusk. The year was 1873, and these lands that had belonged to his people for countless generations were changing, shrinking with each passing season. He adjusted the leather strap that held his knife against his thigh and listened. Something wasn't right. The birds had fallen silent, and even the wind seemed to hold its breath for a moment. Then he heard it, faint but unmistakable, the cry of a child. Swift Arrow frowned. No Apache children should be in this area, especially with the storm approaching. The nearest white settlement was 3 days' ride to the east, and travelers rarely ventured this deep into tribal territory unless they sought trouble or had lost their way. Moving with the fluid grace that had earned him his name, Swift Arrow descended the rocky slope, following the sound that grew clearer with each step. The cry came again, then another, higher pitched. 2 children. His heart quickened. Children alone in this wilderness faced certain death. As he rounded a bend in the narrow canyon, he saw them. A woman sat huddled beneath a shallow overhang, her dress torn and muddy, her face pale with exhaustion. In her arms, she clutched not 1 but 3 small bundles, each containing a child no more than a few months old, triplets. Her body curved protectively around them as if she could shield them from the world with nothing but her will. Swift Arrow froze, instinctively dropping into a crouch. The woman hadn't seen him yet. Her head was bowed, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs as she tried to comfort one of the infants. Her hair, the color of sun-bleached wheat, had come loose from its pins and hung in tangled strands around her face. He should turn back. Alert the tribal council. White settlers, even lost ones, meant trouble. The elders would say this woman had no place here, that she should be escorted to the boundaries of Apache land and sent on her way, if she was shown mercy at all. Many warriors would argue for harsher treatment after what the blue-coated soldiers had done to their people. Yet Swift Arrow remained still, watching. The woman looked up suddenly, perhaps sensing his presence. Her eyes, the pale blue of a winter sky, widened with terror when she saw him. She clutched her babies tighter and pressed herself against the rock wall. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracking with fear and exhaustion, "please don't hurt my children." Swift Arrow understood her words. Unlike some in his tribe, he had learned the white man's language during the brief, uneasy peace when he had traded with settlers before the last war broke out. He didn't respond immediately, assessing the situation with the caution that had kept him alive through 32 summers. The woman was alone. No horse, no supplies except for a small pack beside her. The canyon floor showed signs of recent flooding. She was trapped. Above, the sky darkened as storm clouds gathered. If he left her here, she and the infants would not survive the night. "I mean no harm," he finally said, his English halting but clear. The woman's expression shifted from terror to disbelief, then to desperate hope. "My wagon, the axle broke 2 days ago. Then the floods came." Her voice trembled. My husband is dead. 6 months now. Raiders. I was trying to reach my sister in Willow Creek. Swift Arrow nodded once, understanding more than she said. A widow, alone with 3 infants in hostile territory. Her fate was already sealed unless someone intervened. Storm comes, he said, pointing to the sky. Water will rise here, not safe. As if confirming his words, a distant rumble of thunder echoed through the canyon. One of the babies began to wail, a thin, reedy sound that stirred something deep within him. Swift Arrow had lost his own family, his wife and infant son, to smallpox 3 winters ago. The sound of a child's cry still cut him like a knife. "What is your name?" he asked, taking a careful step forward. "Sarah," she answered. "Sarah Blackwood. These are my children, James, William, and Mary." Swift Arrow glanced up at the darkening sky, then back at the woman. Every instinct formed by tribal law and bitter experience told him to leave her to her fate. She was not his concern. She was the enemy. Yet another part of him, perhaps the part that still remembered holding his own son, could not turn away. "I am Swift Arrow," he said. "You must come, now." Sarah Blackwood stared at him, conflict clear in her eyes. Trust a stranger, an Apache warrior, or face the storm alone with her children. Thunder crashed overhead, louder this time. The first heavy raindrops began to fall, pattering on the stone around them. One of the triplets, the girl, Mary, began to cry again, her tiny face screwed up in distress. Swift Arrow made his decision. Regardless of what the tribal council would say, regardless of the consequences, he would not leave this woman and her children to die. Some laws transcended those of tribe or nation. The law of compassion was one of them. "I will help you," he said, extending his hand. "But we must hurry." Sarah hesitated only a moment before gathering her strength. With trembling arms, she tried to lift all 3 babies at once, but her exhausted muscles betrayed her. Swift Arrow stepped forward, his movements deliberately slowed to avoid frightening her further. "I carry 2, he said, gesturing to the infants. "And will you take one?" The rain was falling harder now, fat drops that splashed against the red earth and filled the air with the rich scent of wet dust. Sarah looked at her children, then at the warrior. What choice did she have? She nodded and carefully handed him 2 of the swaddled infants. Swift Arrow cradled the tiny bundles with surprising gentleness. These children weighed almost nothing, yet carried the full burden of their mother's world. The babies quieted in his arms, perhaps soothed by his steady heartbeat, or simply too exhausted to cry any longer. "This way," he said, turning toward a narrow path that wound upward along the canyon wall. High ground, safe from water. Sarah followed him, clutching her remaining child to her chest. Her legs shook with each step, days of fear and exhaustion taking their toll. Swift Arrow slowed his pace, watching her struggle. In her eyes, he saw the same fierce determination he had seen in the mothers of his tribe, the will to survive not for oneself, but for one's children. "How far?" she asked, her breath coming in short gasps as they climbed. "Not far," he answered, though in truth the journey to the Apache winter camp would take hours, especially at her pace and in this weather. "Rest soon." The skies opened fully now, the rain becoming a torrent that pounded against their bodies and turned the path to slick mud. Swift Arrow shifted the babies to protect them from the worst of the downpour. Behind them, he could hear the growing roar of water rushing through the canyon below. His judgment had been correct. Had they remained, they would already be swept away. Sarah stumbled on the slippery ground, falling to one knee. Swift Arrow turned back, concern etched on his weathered face. "Can you continue?" She nodded, struggling back to her feet. "I have to," she said, and in those simple words, he heard the story of her life these past months. A constant battle against circumstances that offered no mercy. They reached a small cave as darkness fully enveloped the canyon. It wasn't much, barely deep enough to shelter them from the rain, but it would have to do until morning. Swift Arrow carefully placed the two infants on a dry patch of ground and went back out into the storm. He returned minutes later with an armful of relatively dry wood from a protected hollow nearby. With practiced hands, he built a small fire near the cave mouth, positioning it so the smoke would drift outward while the warmth reached inward. Sarah collapsed against the back wall, cradling all three babies close again, her eyes never leaving the Apache warrior as he worked. "Why are you helping us?" she finally asked, her voice barely audible above the storm. Swift Arrow didn't answer immediately. How could he explain something he himself didn't fully understand? Instead, he reached into a pouch at his waist and pulled out some dried meat. "Eat," he said, offering it to her. "Need strength for tomorrow." Sarah accepted the food gratefully. As she ate, Swift Arrow noticed a golden locket hanging from a thin chain around her neck. She caught his gaze and touched it protectively. "My husband," she explained. "Thomas. This is all I have left of him." She swallowed hard, fighting back tears. "We were going to build a life in Willow Creek. He had a brother there. Then the raiders came. They took everything. I managed to hide with the babies, but Thomas..." Her voice broke. Swift Arrow nodded, understanding grief all too well. "I too have lost family," he said simply. Sarah looked at him with new eyes, perhaps seeing for the first time not just an Apache warrior, but a man with his own sorrows. One of the babies, William, began to fuss. Swift Arrow watched as she opened her dress to feed him, her movement speaking of both exhaustion and practiced care. "The others are hungry too," she said, worry creasing her brow. "I don't know if I can feed them all tonight. I haven't eaten properly in days." Swift Arrow turned away, giving her privacy. "The food will help," he said. "Tomorrow, we find more." Outside, the storm raged on, water cascading down the canyon walls in silver sheets. Swift Arrow's thoughts turned to his people. By now, they would be wondering where he was. He had only gone out to scout game trails, promising to return before nightfall. And when he did return, what would he tell them? That he had brought a white woman and her children to their winter camp? The tribal council would be furious. Chief Grey Wolf, especially, harbored deep hatred for the white settlers after his son was killed by cavalry soldiers last spring. Many in the tribe shared his anger, and for good reason. The whites had pushed them from their traditional hunting grounds, broken treaties, and brought diseases that decimated entire families. Yet as Swift Arrow looked at Sarah Blackwood and her three helpless infants, he knew he could not abandon them. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. For tonight, his duty was clear. "Sleep," he told Sarah, settling himself near the fire. "I will watch." Sarah's eyes were already closing, her body surrendering to exhaustion now that the immediate danger had passed. "Thank you," she whispered. "May God bless you for your kindness." Swift Arrow didn't respond. He stared into the flames, wondering if his ancestors would see his actions as kindness or betrayal. The fire crackled and sparked, sending shadows dancing across the cave walls as the storm continued its assault on the world outside. Tomorrow, he would face the consequences of his choice. Tonight, he would ensure these four souls lived to see the dawn. Dawn broke with hesitant fingers of light reaching into the cave. Swift Arrow had not slept. He remained vigilant throughout the night, tending the fire and listening to the storm's gradual retreat. Now, in the pale morning light, He studied Sarah and her children as they slept. The triplets were remarkably small, their faces still bearing the softness of newborns, though Swift Arrow guessed they were at least 3 moons old. In sleep, their features relaxed into identical expressions of peace, 3 tiny mirrors reflecting the same innocence. Their mother curled around them protectively, her body forming a barrier between her children and the world even in unconsciousness. Swift Arrow rose silently and stepped outside. The storm had left its mark on the land, fresh rivulets carved into the canyon walls, uprooted brush scattered across the muddy ground, and the distant roar of the swollen river below. The path ahead would be treacherous, especially for a weakened woman carrying 3 infants. He closed his eyes, inhaling deeply. The morning air carried the scent of sage and wet earth, but also something else, wood smoke. His people were not far. He had to make a decision quickly. When he returned to the cave, Sarah was awake, attempting to change the soiled cloths that wrapped her babies, using the few clean scraps that remained in her pack. "Good morning," she said softly, her voice steadier than it had been the previous night. Food and rest, however brief, had restored some of her strength. Swift Arrow nodded in acknowledgement. "We must go soon," he said, crouching beside her. Bad ground after rain, slow walking. Sarah bit her lip, looking down at her children. "Where are you taking us?" It was the question he had wrestled with all night. The right answer, the safe answer, would be to lead her to the edge of Apache territory and point her toward Willow Creek. But she would never make it alone, not with 3 infants and no supplies. The nearest white settlement was too far, the terrain too difficult. "My people," he said finally. "Winter camp in valley beyond hills." Fear flickered across Sarah's face. "Your people, will they welcome us?" Swift Arrow could not lie to her. "No," he admitted, "but you need food, rest, babies need warmth." He paused, meeting her gaze directly. "I will speak for you." Sarah studied him, searching for reassurance he could not honestly provide. Then she glanced at her children, and her expression hardened with resolve. "All right," she said. "I trust you." Those 3 words carried a weight. Swift Arrow felt keenly. Trust was not something freely given between their peoples, not after decades of bloodshed and broken promises on both sides. That this woman would place her life and the lives of her children in his hands spoke either of remarkable courage or utter desperation, perhaps both. They set out as the sun climbed higher, Swift Arrow carrying 2 of the infants again, while Sarah managed the 3rd. He had fashioned a sling from his spare shirt, enabling her to carry her child more securely against her chest, leaving her hands free to navigate the difficult terrain. Their progress was painfully slow. The mud sucked at their feet, and twice Sarah nearly fell. Swift Arrow found himself constantly scanning the path ahead, identifying the safest route, sometimes doubling back to help her over particularly treacherous sections. By midday, dark clouds had gathered again, threatening another downpour. "There!" Swift Arrow pointed to a stand of juniper trees ahead. "Rest." They reached the small grove just as the first raindrops began to fall. The dense canopy provided shelter, and Swift Arrow quickly constructed a rudimentary lean-to using branches and his deerskin cloak. Under this meager protection, Sarah nursed her children one by one. "They're hungry all the time now," she said, fatigue evident in her voice. "I worry my milk isn't enough." Swift Arrow studied the infants with concern. Though he was no healer, he could see they were undernourished, their cries weaker than they should be. "Camp has food," he assured her. "Healing woman knows ways to help mothers with milk." Sarah looked at him with surprise. "You would ask your healer to help me? Children are sacred," he replied simply. "Apache, white, no difference to Great Spirit." A single tear slid down Sarah's cheek. She quickly wiped it away. My husband believed that too. That's why we left Boston. He said there had to be a place where people could live together without all this hatred. She gave a bitter laugh. I thought he was a fool. Now look at me. Alive only because of the kindness of someone I was taught to fear. Swift Arrow remained silent, watching the rain drip from the juniper branches. His people and hers had legitimate grievances against one another. Blood had been spilled that could never be restored, yet here they sat, sharing shelter and purpose, keeping 3 innocent lives safe. When the brief shower passed, they continued their journey. As they crested a ridge in the late afternoon, Swift Arrow felt his heart tighten. Below them lay the winter camp of his people, 24 hide-covered lodges arranged in a semicircle near a flowing creek. Smoke rising from cook fires, children playing among the dwellings, women working at tanning racks, men tending to horses or weapons. Home. Sarah gasped softly beside him, clutching her baby closer. Whether it was fear or wonder that prompted her reaction, Swift Arrow couldn't tell. "Many people," she whispered. Swift Arrow nodded. "Winter brings tribes together. 3 bands here now. What will happen when they see us?" The question hung in the air between them. Before Swift Arrow could answer, a warning cry rang out from below. They had been spotted. He saw figures pointing in their direction, several warriors already reaching for weapons. "Stay close," he told Sarah. "Do not show fear." She gave a tremulous nod, straightening her shoulders with effort. Swift Arrow took a deep breath and began the descent toward the camp, carrying 2 of her children protectively against his chest. With each step, he silently rehearsed the words he would speak to Chief Grey Wolf and the tribal council, words that must somehow bridge the chasm between duty to his tribe and the promise he had made to this woman and her children. Behind him, Sarah followed, her face pale but determined. Whatever awaited them in the Apache camp, there was no turning back now. A tense silence fell over the Apache camp as Swift Arrow led Sarah toward the central clearing. Warriors formed a loose circle around them, faces hard with suspicion and hands hovering near weapons. Women pulled children behind them, watching with wary eyes. Some of the elders emerged from their lodges, their weathered faces revealing nothing of their thoughts. Swift Arrow kept his back straight, his gaze steady. Beside him, Sarah trembled visibly but continued walking, clutching her baby to her chest as if the child were both shield and purpose. From the largest lodge stepped a tall, imposing figure, Chief Grey Wolf. Though past 60 winters, his body remained powerful, his black eyes sharp as obsidian beneath the silver-streaked hair that gave him his name. The beaded bands on his arms spoke of coup counted in battle, of enemies defeated and honor earned through decades of leadership. Those eyes now fixed on Swift Arrow with cold fury. "What have you brought to our camp?" Grey Wolf's voice carried across the clearing, speaking in Apache so the white woman would not understand. "Have you lost your mind, Swift Arrow?" Swift Arrow stopped at a respectful distance, inclining his head slightly to acknowledge the chief's authority without lowering his gaze. "I found this woman and her children trapped by the floodwaters," he replied in their language. "They would have died in the storm, and this concerns us how?" A harsh voice cut in. Running Fox, the war chief, pushed through the gathering crowd, younger than Grey Wolf by 20 summers. His face was marked with the scars of many battles, most recently against the blue-coated soldiers who had massacred his family at Whispering Creek. "Let the white man's God protect his own." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembled tribe. Swift Arrow felt Sarah press closer to him, sensing the hostility even without understanding the words. "The children are innocent," Swift Arrow said, his voice carrying the quiet authority that had earned him respect among the warriors, despite his relatively young age. 3 moons old. Would you have me leave them to die?" Better that than bring danger to our people, Running Fox spat. Her kind brings only death, disease. Soldiers who follow. Grey Wolf raised a hand, silencing the war chief. His gaze moved to the infants, the two in Swift Arrow's arms, and the one Sarah held. Something flickered in his eyes, perhaps memory of his own children when they were small, before white men's bullets and white men's diseases took them. You were to scout game trails, Grey Wolf said evenly, not collect strays. The Great Spirit placed them in my path, Swift Arrow replied. I could not turn away. An elderly woman stepped forward then, Night Flower, the tribe's most respected healer and Grey Wolf's sister. Her face, lined with the wisdom of 80 winters, showed neither hostility nor welcome as she approached Sarah. The children are thin, she observed in Apache, then switched to halting English. Babies hungry. Sarah, startled to be addressed directly, nodded. Yes, I haven't had enough food. My milk is weak. Nightflower studied her face, then looked to Swift Arrow. Bring them to my lodge, she said in Apache. The little ones first, then we decide about the mother. Grey Wolf frowned. Sister, would you make war on infants, brother? Nightflower's voice was soft, but carried the weight of her position. These are matters of healing, not battle. Let the council decide the woman's fate, but the children need care now. Grey Wolf's jaw tightened, but he gave a curt nod. No one, not even the chief, would interfere with the healer's domain. Swift Arrow translated Nightflower's offer to Sarah, whose eyes darted nervously between the tribal members surrounding them. Will they take my babies from me? She whispered. No, Swift Arrow assured her, though he was not entirely certain himself. She wishes to help them, to help you. Sarah hesitated, then nodded. Thank you, she said directly to Nightflower, the universal language of a mother's concern bridging the gap between their worlds. Nightflower turned and walked toward her lodge at the eastern edge of the camp. Swift Arrow guided Sarah to follow, feeling the stares of the entire tribe burning into his back. The council will meet when the sun touches the mountains, Grey Wolf called after him. Bring the woman. Her fate will be decided before nightfall. Swift Arrow acknowledged the order with a slight inclination of his head, but did not turn around. He could feel Sarah trembling beside him. What did he say? She asked in a whisper. That you are to rest now, Swift Arrow lied, not wishing to increase her fear. There would be time enough for truth later. Nightflower's lodge was warm and fragrant with drying herbs. The old woman gestured for Sarah to sit on a pile of soft furs near the central fire. Swift Arrow gently placed the two infants he carried beside their brother in their mother's arms. Stay with children, Nightflower told Sarah in broken English. Swift Arrow, go now. Talk to Chief. Sarah looked up at Swift Arrow with panic in her eyes. Don't leave us, she pleaded. I must speak to the council, he replied. Nightflower will protect you. She is wise and kind. As if to prove his words, Nightflower was already preparing a tea, adding herbs to a small clay pot of water heating over the fire. This make milk strong, she explained to Sarah. Good for babies. Swift Arrow moved toward the entrance, but Sarah caught his hand. They'll make you send us away, won't they? She asked, her voice barely audible. He looked down at her pale fingers against his bronze skin, such a small point of contact between two worlds that had known only violence. I gave my word, he said simply. You will not face the wilderness alone again. Outside, he found Running Fox waiting, flanked by two younger warriors. The chief wishes to speak with you now, the war chief said, his voice hard. Alone. Swift Arrow nodded and followed him toward Grey Wolf's lodge, aware of the whispers that followed them through the camp. He had known there would be consequences for his actions. Now he would face them. Grey Wolf was seated inside, the smoke from his pipe curling toward the opening in the roof. His face was like stone as Swift Arrow entered and took his place on the opposite side of the fire. "You have always been like a son to me," the chief began, his voice low and controlled. "Since your father fell in battle, I have guided you, taught you our ways. When you lost your wife and child to the spotted sickness, I mourned with you." He drew on his pipe, the embers glowing. So tell me, Swift Arrow, why you would betray your people this way." Swift Arrow met the older man's gaze steadily. "I have betrayed no one, my chief. I have only honored what you yourself taught me, that courage and compassion are the true marks of a warrior." "Compassion?" Grey Wolf's voice hardened. "For the very people who slaughter our children, who drive us from our hunting grounds, who bring disease and whiskey to destroy what their bullets cannot, for innocent children who had no part in these crimes," Swift Arrow countered, "and for a mother who has lost everything but still fights to keep her little ones alive." He leaned forward slightly. "Is this not what we ourselves would do? Is this not the strength we honor in our own women?" Grey Wolf was silent for a long moment, studying the younger man's face. "You speak with passion, Swift Arrow, but passion does not make you right." He set his pipe down with deliberate care. "The council will meet at sunset. Until then, the woman and her children may stay in Nightflower's lodge. But make no mistake, they cannot remain among us. The risk is too great." Swift Arrow knew further argument would only harden the chief's position. He nodded once and rose to leave. "Swift Arrow," Grey Wolf's voice stopped him at the entrance. "Consider carefully the path you choose. Your loyalty must be to your people first." The warning was clear. Swift Arrow stepped out into the afternoon sunlight, his heart heavy with the knowledge that before the day ended, he would have to make a choice that would forever alter his place among his people. As the afternoon shadows lengthened across the camp, Sarah sat in Nightflower's lodge, alternating between nursing her children and sipping the bitter tea the old woman had prepared for her. Though they couldn't converse beyond simple words and gestures, Sarah felt a cautious gratitude toward the healer who treated her babies with such gentle expertise. Nightflower examined each triplet carefully, mixing a salve of bear fat and herbs for their chafed skin, showing Sarah how to apply it. The elderly woman's weathered hands moved with practiced confidence, her eyes missing nothing. "Strong babies," she commented in halting English, nodding with approval as little Mary gripped her finger. "Fighter spirit." Sarah managed a weak smile. "Don't they have to be strong?" she replied, unsure how much the woman understood. "They're all I have left." Outside, the camp had fallen strangely quiet. Sarah knew something important was happening. She had seen the grave expressions, the gathering of elders, the way Swift Arrow's face had tightened when he left. Though he had tried to hide it, she knew her presence had caused trouble for him. "What will they do to us?" she asked Nightflower, gesturing toward the center of the camp. The old woman's eyes were kind but unflinching. "Council decide," she said simply. "Swift Arrow speak for you. Good man, strong heart." She tapped her chest for emphasis. "But it might not be enough," Sarah finished silently. At the central fire pit, the tribal council had assembled, 12 men seated in a semicircle with Grey Wolf at the center. Swift Arrow stood before them, his posture straight and proud despite the weight of their collective scrutiny. Behind the council members, many from the tribe had gathered to witness the proceedings. Women, younger warriors, even some of the older children. Grey Wolf raised his hand for silence, though none was speaking. The crackling of the fire and the distant cry of a hawk were the only sounds as he began. We are gathered to decide what must be done about the white woman and her children that Swift Arrow has brought among us, he announced, his deep voice carrying across the gathering. Let all who wish to speak be heard, but remember that the safety of our people must come first. Running Fox was the first to rise. His scarred face was hard with hatred as he addressed the council. This woman's people have taken everything from us, our lands, our game, our very children, he said, his voice tight with controlled fury. Now one of them sits in our camp, learning our ways, seeing our strengths and weaknesses. When she leaves, if she leaves, she will tell others where to find us. The soldiers will come, as they always do. He turned to Swift Arrow. Your compassion may feel righteous, but it endangers us all. Murmurs of agreement followed his words. Next rose Stone Calf, an elder whose wisdom was respected by all. The white man's treachery is well known to us, he said, his voice quavering with age. But so too is our code of honor. A helpless enemy, especially women and children, has traditionally been shown mercy by the Apache. He gazed around the circle. Have we become so twisted by hatred that we abandon our own ways? This sparked debate among the council members. Some argued that old customs belonged to a time before the white man's betrayals. Others that abandoning their principles would make them no better than their enemies. Swift Arrow listened patiently, waiting his turn to speak. When the initial arguments had been voiced, Grey Wolf nodded to him. You have brought this matter upon us, Swift Arrow, the chief said. Speak your mind. Swift Arrow stepped forward, his gaze moving slowly across the faces of the council. I have fought alongside many of you, he began. I have drawn blood, defending our people and our lands. My loyalty has never wavered. He paused, letting his words sink in. But yesterday, when the Great Spirit placed this woman and her children in my path, I faced a choice not between loyalty and betrayal, but between honor and cowardice. He described finding Sarah and the triplets, their desperate condition, the storm that would have surely claimed their lives. Look at me and tell me, he challenged. Which of you would have left tiny infants to die, regardless of the color of their mother's skin? His eyes found Running Fox. Even you, who has suffered greatly at the hands of the white man, would you truly have the heart to abandon helpless children? Running Fox's jaw tightened, but he did not answer. I do not ask that we adopt them as our own, Swift Arrow continued, and only that we give them shelter until the mother regains her strength and the children are fit to travel. Then I myself will guide them safely to the white settlement at Willow Creek. In Nightflower's lodge, Sarah had grown increasingly anxious as the afternoon waned. She could hear the rise and fall of voices from the council, but could understand nothing of what was being said. The triplets, freshly fed and attended to, slept peacefully, unaware that their fate hung in the balance. I should be there, she said to Nightflower, gesturing toward the gathering. They're discussing my children's lives. The old woman shook her head. Woman not speak in council, she explained. Swift Arrow speak for you. Sarah bit her lip in frustration. All her life, others had decided her fate, her father, her husband, and now a council of men from a culture she barely understood. Yet what choice did she have? As the sun touched the western mountains, casting long shadows across the camp, the debate in the council reached its climax. Grey Wolf raised his hand for silence once more. We have heard enough, he announced. It is time to decide. Swift Arrow stood tall, awaiting the judgment that would determine not only Sarah's future, but his own place among his people. The council's deliberation was brief, but intense. Voices rose and fell like the wind through canyon walls, some harsh with anger, others measured with reason. Swift Arrow stood silent, his face betraying nothing of the turmoil within. This was the way of his people, to hear all voices before judgment was passed, but he had never before stood as the one being judged. At last, Grey Wolf raised his hand once more. The camp fell silent, even the children sensing the gravity of the moment. "The council has spoken," the chief announced, his weathered face solemn in the fading light. "The woman and her children may remain until the next full moon, 20 days. By then, the infants must be strong enough to travel, and Swift Arrow will guide them to the white settlement at Willow Creek." Swift Arrow felt a weight lift from his shoulders, though not entirely. 20 days was less than he had hoped for, but more than he had feared. "During this time," Grey Wolf continued, his gaze hardening as it fixed on Swift Arrow, "the woman will stay in Nightflower's lodge. She will not wander freely in the camp. She will not observe our ceremonies or our defenses, and you, Swift Arrow, will be responsible for her every action." Running Fox stepped forward, his face dark with anger. "This is a mistake, my chief, one we may all live to regret." "The council has decided," Grey Wolf replied firmly, "but your concerns are noted, war chief. Double the sentries around the camp. If any white men approach our territory, I want to know immediately." Running Fox nodded curtly and strode away, several younger warriors following in his wake. The rest of the gathering began to disperse, many casting troubled glances toward Nightflower's lodge, where the white woman waited. Swift Arrow approached Grey Wolf as the other council members departed. "Thank you, my chief," he said quietly. Grey Wolf's expression remained stern. "Do not thank me yet, Swift Arrow. You have chosen a difficult path." He placed a heavy hand on the younger man's shoulder. 20 days, not one sunrise more. And when you return from delivering them to their people, you will undergo purification rituals before rejoining the tribe." Swift Arrow nodded his acceptance. It was a fair judgment, considering the alternatives. He made his way to Nightflower's lodge, feeling the eyes of the tribe upon him. Some gazes held disapproval, others curiosity. A few even showed respect. Whatever their thoughts, Swift Arrow had altered his standing among them. Whether that change would ultimately strengthen or weaken him remained to be seen. Sarah looked up sharply when he entered the lodge, her face tense with apprehension. She had been pacing one of the triplets, James, cradled against her shoulder while the other two slept on a soft deerskin. "And what happened?" she asked immediately. "Are they sending us away?" Swift Arrow shook his head. "You stay 20 days. He held up his hands, fingers spread twice. "Then I take you to Willow Creek." The relief that washed over Sarah's face was so profound that tears sprang to her eyes. She quickly blinked them away, unwilling to show weakness. 20 days, she repeated. "The babies will be stronger by then." "I'll be stronger." She looked directly at Swift Arrow. "Thank you. I know what it cost you to speak for us." Swift Arrow glanced at Nightflower, who was busying herself with her herbs, but undoubtedly listening to every word. The old woman had always been able to read him better than most. "There are rules," he told Sarah. "You must stay here, in this lodge, not walk in camp." Sarah nodded quickly. "Of course, I understand. I won't cause any trouble." Nightflower approached, carrying a bowl of stew, rich with meat and vegetables that made Sarah's stomach rumble audibly. The old woman smiled knowingly and handed it to her. "Eat," she instructed. "Make strong milk for babies." As Sarah ate, Swift Arrow explained the council's decision in greater detail, with Nightflower occasionally helping to translate the more complex ideas. Sarah listened attentively, her gaze often drifting to her sleeping children. "What about you?" she asked when he had finished. "What happens to you because of this?" The question surprised him. Few whites ever considered how their presence affected the individual lives of his people. "I am responsible for you," he replied simply. "No, I mean..." Sarah hesitated. "Are you in trouble with your tribe because you helped us?" Swift Arrow considered his answer carefully. "Some understand, some do not." He looked toward the lodge entrance, where the sounds of the camp preparing for evening meal could be heard. "It does not matter. I did what was right." Nightflower snorted softly, speaking in Apache. "It matters greatly, and you know it. Running Fox will not forget this challenge to his authority." "And others question your judgment. Let them question," Swift Arrow replied in their language. "Time will prove me right or wrong." Sarah watched this exchange with curiosity, unable to understand the words, but reading the tension in their faces. "I don't want to cause division among your people," she said quietly. Swift Arrow turned back to her. "Division was already there," he replied. "Between those who see only enemies and those who remember the old ways." He paused, choosing his words with care. 20 days, then all returns to how it was. But even as he spoke, Swift Arrow knew nothing would truly return to how it was before. Something had changed when he found Sarah and her children in that canyon, something within himself that could not be undone, regardless of the tribe's judgment or the outcome of the next 20 days. Outside, the campfires blazed against the gathering darkness, and the evening star appeared above the western mountains, silent witness to promises made and challenges yet to come. Days passed slowly in Nightflower's lodge. For Sarah, who had spent her life in constant motion, first as the daughter of a Boston merchant, then as a frontier wife, and finally as a desperate widow fleeing west, the confinement was both blessing and burden. Her body welcomed the rest, growing stronger with each passing day. Nightflower's remedies and the camp's plentiful food restored her milk, and the triplets began to thrive, their tiny faces filling out, their cries becoming more robust. But her mind chafed at the limitations. Through the small smoke hole in the lodge's roof, she could see only a patch of sky. Through the entrance, only a narrow view of the camp's edge. The world had shrunk to the dimensions of a single dwelling, and Sarah found herself counting the days with mixed emotions, grateful for the sanctuary, yet anxious for what lay beyond it. Swift Arrow visited daily, sometimes bringing small gifts. A carved wooden toy for the babies, fresh berries wrapped in leaves, once even a small mirror that had been traded from white settlers years before. Sarah treasured these moments, not just for the items themselves, but for the connection they represented to the outside world and to the man who had risked so much to save her family. On the 7th day, as Swift Arrow entered the lodge with a handful of early spring flowers, Sarah was sitting cross-legged on a mat, attempting to learn Apache words from Nightflower. The old woman had proven to be a patient teacher, and Sarah a determined student. "Ishkeen," Nightflower was saying, pointing to the babies. "Children." "Ishkeen," Sarah repeated carefully, the unfamiliar sounds awkward on her tongue. Swift Arrow paused at the entrance, momentarily surprised by the scene. Few whites ever bothered to learn the Apache language, viewing it as primitive or unnecessary. Yet here was Sarah, concentrating with the same intensity he had seen when she cared for her children, determined to bridge the gap between their worlds. "Your pronunciation is improving," he said. entering fully and placing the flowers in a small clay pot near Sarah's sleeping area. She looked up with a smile that transformed her face, erasing the worry lines that had become habitual since her husband's death. Nightflower is very patient with me. Though I suspect I sound like a child to your ears. Swift Arrow sat nearby, noting how much healthier she appeared compared to the desperate woman he had found in the canyon. Her cheeks had regained color, and her wheat blonde hair, now clean and brushed, caught the firelight like strands of gold. "Why do you learn?" he asked, genuinely curious. Sarah glanced at Nightflower, who was checking on the sleeping triplets, then back to Swift Arrow. "Because you've all done so much for us. Because words matter. Because..." She hesitated. "Because I want to understand." "Understand what?" "Your people, your ways." Her eyes held his steadily. "You." An unexpected warmth spread through Swift Arrow's chest. Before he could respond, Nightflower interrupted in Apache. "The council is gathering again," she told him. "Running Fox has been speaking against you to the younger warriors." "Grey Wolf sent me to find you." Swift Arrow's expression darkened. He rose quickly, nodding thanks to the old woman. To Sarah, he said only, "I must go. Tribe business." Sarah sensed the sudden tension. "Is something wrong?" "No," he lied, not wishing to burden her. "Rest. I return later." Outside, the camp buzzed with subdued activity. Children played quieter games than usual. Women spoke in hushed tones as they worked, and warriors gathered in small groups, their conversations stopping when Swift Arrow passed. He felt the divide growing, those who supported his decision to help Sarah and those who saw it as weakness or betrayal. At the council fire, Grey Wolf waited with the tribal elders. Running Fox stood nearby, his face set in hard lines of disapproval. "Oh, you called for me, my chief?" Swift Arrow asked, taking his place in the circle. Grey Wolf nodded gravely. "Scouts have reported white men near the eastern boundary of our territory. 3 riders, heavily armed, searching the canyons." Swift Arrow's heart quickened. "Searching for what? Or whom?" Running Fox interjected. "Perhaps your white woman was not as alone as she claimed." "She is a widow," Swift Arrow replied firmly. "Her husband was killed by raiders." "So she says," Running Fox countered. "Yet now armed men search our lands, so soon after her arrival. A coincidence." The council members murmured among themselves, the seed of doubt taking root. "What did these men look like?" Swift Arrow asked, turning to Grey Wolf. "Were they soldiers?" An older scout named Tall Pine answered, "Not soldiers. No blue coats, rough men." "Hunters, perhaps, or trappers, or raiders," Swift Arrow suggested, a theory forming in his mind. "The same who killed her husband, perhaps now searching for her." Running Fox scoffed. "Convenient speculation. We should question the woman," one of the elders suggested. "Learn the truth from her own lips." Grey Wolf considered this, then nodded. "Bring her to the council, Swift Arrow." But the children remain with Nightflower. Swift Arrow felt a twist of apprehension. Sarah had been sheltered from the tribe's scrutiny thus far. To face the council, especially with Running Fox's hostility so evident, would be a trial for which she was unprepared. "She does not speak our language well," he protested. "She will be frightened." "Then you will translate," Grey Wolf decided. "And do faithfully, with no softening of our questions or her answers." Swift Arrow had no choice but to comply. He returned to Nightflower's lodge, where Sarah immediately sensed his disquiet. "What's happened?" she asked, rising to meet him. Swift Arrow explained as gently as possible about the riders and the council's demand to question her. Sarah paled, but squared her shoulders with determination. "I have nothing to hide," she said, though her voice trembled slightly. "But my babies will stay here with Nightflower, he assured her. No harm will come to them. Sarah kissed each of her sleeping children, whispering promises of a swift return. Then she followed Swift Arrow out into the camp, her first time beyond the lodge's confines since their arrival. The stares of the tribe fell upon her like physical weight. Women paused in their tasks. Children pointed and whispered. Warriors watched with varying degrees of suspicion. Sarah walked with her head high, though Swift Arrow could see her hands shaking. At the council circle, Grey Wolf motioned for her to sit opposite him. Swift Arrow took his place beside her, close enough that she could feel his reassuring presence, but not so near as to suggest impropriety. "Did you ask her about the men who killed her husband?" Grey Wolf instructed Swift Arrow. "Every detail she remembers." Swift Arrow translated, watching Sarah's face carefully. She took a deep breath, steeling herself before responding. "There were 5 of them," she began, her voice surprisingly steady. "They came at dawn, 6 months ago. Our homestead was isolated, too isolated, Thomas always said, but the land was good." Her eyes grew distant with memory. "They wore no uniforms, carried no flag, just rough men with hard eyes and guns." As Swift Arrow translated her words, he saw some of the council members' expressions soften slightly. The random violence of lawless men was something they understood all too well. "They demanded food, supplies, our horses," Sarah continued. Thomas tried to reason with them. He offered them what we could spare, but her voice caught, "They shot him right in front of me. Then they took everything of value and burned what they couldn't carry." "How did you escape?" Running Fox demanded, when Swift Arrow had translated. "I was 7 months pregnant. When the shooting started, Thomas pushed me into the root cellar beneath the cabin floor. They never found me." Sarah's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I stayed hidden until they left. I buried my husband with my own hands, salvaged what little remained, and left the next day. I've been traveling ever since, trying to reach Thomas's brother in Willow Creek." The sincerity in her voice was unmistakable. Even Running Fox seemed momentarily disarmed by her story, though his suspicion quickly returned. "And these men," he pressed, "would they have reason to hunt for you?" Sarah frowned when Swift Arrow translated the question. "Why would they? They took everything we had." "Not everything," Running Fox replied, gesturing toward the camp where her children lay sleeping. "Your little ones carry your husband's blood. Perhaps there is something more: inheritance, vengeance, some white man's reason we do not understand." Sarah's face paled as the implication sank in. "Would you think those riders are the same men? That they're looking for me?" Swift Arrow watched her reaction carefully, seeing genuine fear replace confusion. Whatever these men might be searching for, Sarah clearly had not expected them to follow her. Grey Wolf studied her as well, his aged eyes missing nothing. After Swift Arrow translated her response, the chief spoke directly to Sarah for the first time. "If these men are enemies to you," he said, each word measured and deliberate, "then they are enemies to those who shelter you." When Swift Arrow translated this, Sarah's hands flew to her mouth in horror. "I never meant to bring danger to your people," she whispered. "I didn't know they would follow me. I swear it." Grey Wolf held up a hand, silencing her. "The question now," he continued, "is what must be done to protect both our people and yours." The council deliberated long into the night. Sarah had been escorted back to Nightflower's lodge, where she now sat in anxious silence, watching over her sleeping children while waiting for news of her fate. The revelation that the raiders might be hunting her had shaken her to the core. Every creak of the lodge poles, every whisper of wind made her start, imagining rough hands reaching for her babies. Outside, the debate raged. Some, led by Running Fox, argued that the white woman and her children should be sent away immediately. Their presence now posed too great a risk to the tribe. Others counseled caution, pointing out that expelling a mother and 3 infants into the wilderness with killers lurking nearby would be tantamount to murder. Swift Arrow spoke last, his voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. These raiders are not soldiers following orders. They are wolves who prey on the weak. If they are hunting the white woman, it is because they leave no witnesses to their crimes. He looked around the circle of fire-lit faces. We are Apache. We do not fear such men, but neither do we deliver the innocent into their hands. Grey Wolf listened to all arguments before rising to deliver his judgment. The camp fell silent, waiting. The woman and her children will remain until the appointed time, he declared, his voice carrying the weight of final authority. But we will not sit and wait for these white killers to find our camp. Swift Arrow, you will take 4 warriors and track these men, learn their purpose. If they are indeed the raiders the woman described, deal with them as enemies. Swift Arrow nodded, accepting the mission without hesitation. Running Fox stepped forward, his face hard in the firelight. I will lead this hunting party, he insisted. As war chief, it is my right. Grey Wolf studied him for a long moment. You both will go, he decided. Running Fox as war chief, Swift Arrow because he knows the white woman's story best. Choose 3 others between you. Leave at first light. The meeting disbanded, warriors dispersing to prepare for the coming dawn. Swift Arrow made his way to Nightflower's lodge, knowing Sarah would be waiting for news. He found her sitting beside her children, a small knife clutched in her hand. A pathetic defense, but it spoke volumes about her determination to protect her little ones at any cost. She looked up when he entered, her face pale with worry. What's happening? She asked immediately. And I heard raised voices. Swift Arrow sat across from her, noticing how the firelight caught in her hair, turning it to beaten gold. Council has decided, he said. You stay until time we agreed. 20 days. Relief flooded her features, but quickly gave way to concern. And those men, the riders. I go with warriors tomorrow. Find these men. Learn if they are same who killed your husband. Sarah's hand tightened around the knife. And if they are. Swift Arrow's expression hardened. Then they will not threaten you again. She studied his face, seeming to fully comprehend his meaning. Instead of showing fear or revulsion at the implicit violence, she nodded slowly. Thank you, she whispered. Then, with a visible effort to master her emotions, she added, be careful. These men, they show no mercy. Nor do Apache warriors when protecting their own, he replied. The words hung between them, laden with meaning neither was prepared to fully acknowledge. Sarah was not their own. She was an outsider, tolerated only because of Swift Arrow's intervention and Grey Wolf's grudging compassion. Yet something in Swift Arrow's tone suggested otherwise, at least where he personally was concerned. Nightflower, who had been grinding herbs in the corner, looked up with knowing eyes but said nothing. Sarah lowered the knife, setting it aside. When do you leave? First light. She reached for a small leather pouch hanging around her neck, not the locket containing her husband's likeness, but something else. Opening it, she removed a simple silver ring. This was my mother's, she explained. It's the only thing of value I have left. She held it out to him. Take it. For luck. For protection. Swift Arrow hesitated. Among his people, to accept such a personal gift implied a bond beyond mere friendship. I cannot take this, he said gently. Please, she insisted. You've risked everything for us. Let me give you something in return, however small. After a moment's pause, Swift Arrow accepted the ring, tucking it carefully into the medicine pouch he wore against his chest. "I will return it when I come back," he promised. "Oh, just come back," she replied softly. Dawn broke clear and cold. 5 mounted warriors rode out from the Apache camp, Swift Arrow and Running Fox in the lead, followed by 3 seasoned fighters, Black Knife, renowned for his tracking skills, 2 hawks, whose marksmanship with a rifle was unmatched among the tribe, and Young Elk, swift and silent as his namesake. They headed east, following the trail the scouts had reported. For the first few hours, the group rode in tense silence, the animosity between Swift Arrow and Running Fox a palpable force. Finally, as they paused to water their horses at a small creek, Running Fox spoke. "You care for this white woman," he said. It was not a question but an accusation. Swift Arrow met his gaze steadily. "I care that she and her children live." "There is more to it than that," Running Fox pressed. "I see how you look at her, how you speak for her. Your heart has been captured." The other warriors pretended not to listen, but their attention was evident in the stillness of their postures. "My heart remains with my people," Swift Arrow replied evenly. "But I will not deny compassion for those who suffer, whatever the color of their skin." Running Fox scoffed. "Compassion? Is that what you call it?" He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I too had a family once. A wife who sang like summer rain, a son who would have been a great warrior, both gone now, their blood soaking into the earth of a place we called home until white soldiers came." His eyes burned with old pain. Where was white compassion then? Swift Arrow did not flinch from the war chief's gaze. The crimes of some do not make all guilty. "Would you have us become like the worst of them, killing women and children without mercy?" Running Fox turned away, his jaw tight. "We shall see what these riders want. Then I will decide if your white woman deserves our protection or our judgment." The conversation ended as Black Knife signaled from the ridge above. He had found something. The 5 warriors converged on a small clearing where the remnants of a campfire still smoldered. The tracks of 3 horses led away toward the north, deeper into Apache territory. "They are not hiding their trail," 2 hawks observed. "Either very foolish or very confident." Black Knife knelt, examining the campsite. 3 men, heavily armed. They cooked rabbit here, but left much of the meat uneaten. They were in a hurry. He pointed to discarded bones. "Left before sunrise." Swift Arrow studied the ground carefully, his eyes narrowing as he spotted something half buried in the dirt. A small button made of shell, decorative and feminine, the kind that might adorn a woman's dress. "Look," he said, retrieving it. "This is not a hunter's or a soldier's." Running Fox took the button, turning it over in his palm. A trophy, perhaps. "Taken from a victim, or evidence they have been searching abandoned homesteads," Swift Arrow suggested, looking for signs of the woman. Young Elk, who had been scouting the perimeter, returned with grim news. They split up after leaving camp. 1 rider continued north, 2 turned west, toward our winter camp. The warriors exchanged alarmed glances. The winter camp housed not only warriors, but women, children, and elders. And within it, Sarah and her triplets, possible targets for these unknown riders. "We must warn the camp," Swift Arrow said urgently. Running Fox nodded, rivalry momentarily forgotten in the face of potential threat to their people. 2 hawks, Young Elk, tracked the one who went north. Black Knife returned to camp and alert Grey Wolf. Swift Arrow and I will pursue the 2 heading west. No one questioned the war chief's orders. Within moments, the group had split up, each with their assigned mission. As Swift Arrow and Running Fox rode hard toward the west, following the fresh trail, A strange alignment had occurred. For the first time since Sarah's arrival, they shared a common purpose: protection of the tribe that now, willingly or not, included a white woman and her 3 small children. Back at the camp, Sarah sat in the open doorway of Nightflower's lodge, enjoying the rare privilege of fresh air and sunshine. Grey Wolf had relaxed the restriction on her movement slightly, allowing her to sit outside as long as she remained near the lodge. The triplets lay on a soft blanket beside her, kicking their tiny legs in the warm air, their faces growing rounder and healthier with each passing day. Nightflower had shown her how to fashion a cradle board, the traditional Apache baby carrier, and Sarah was attempting to duplicate the old woman's skillful weaving, her fingers still clumsy with the unfamiliar technique. "Gah, do inda," Nightflower corrected her gently. "Not like that. Under, then over." Sarah adjusted her weaving, smiling at the old woman's patience. "Like this." Nightflower nodded approval. "Good. Soon make 3. One for each Ishkin." As they worked, Sarah couldn't help glancing repeatedly toward the eastern horizon, where Swift Arrow and the other warriors had disappeared hours earlier. Her worry must have shown on her face, for Nightflower patted her hand reassuringly. "Swift Arrow, strong warrior, smart hunter, he return." "I hope so," Sarah murmured, surprising herself with the depth of emotion behind those simple words. When had this Apache warrior, once a stranger and potential enemy, become so important to her? When had his safety begun to matter almost as much as her children's? She had no time to examine these troubling questions. A commotion at the edge of camp drew her attention, a rider approaching at full gallop, his horse lathered with exertion. Black Knife, alone. Sarah's heart sank. Something was wrong. Grey Wolf received Black Knife in the center of the camp, listening intently as the warrior delivered his report. The chief's face, normally impassive, darkened with each word. Around them, a crowd gathered, warriors reaching for weapons, mothers drawing children close, elders watching with grave concern. From her position outside Nightflower's lodge, Sarah could not hear what was being said, but the tension rippling through the camp was unmistakable. Nightflower rose swiftly, gathering the triplets from their blanket. "Come," the old woman urged. "Inside now." "What's happening?" Sarah asked, even as she helped collect her children. Nightflower's weathered face was grim. "Bad men come. Warriors prepare." Sarah's blood ran cold. "The raiders, they're coming here." The old woman nodded once, shepherding Sarah and the babies into the lodge. Once inside, she moved with surprising speed for one of her years, pulling up a section of flooring to reveal a small storage pit beneath. "Hide here," she instructed, pointing to the space. "If bad men come, you and Ishkane go in. Stay quiet." Sarah stared at the dark hole with dread, memories of the root cellar where she had hidden during her husband's murder flooding back. But she nodded, understanding the necessity. As Nightflower replaced the floor covering, Sarah gathered her children close, kissing each tiny forehead as if it might be the last time. Outside, the camp transformed into a fortress. Warriors took up defensive positions, women armed themselves with knives and hatchets, older children were sent to hide in predetermined locations. Grey Wolf strode among them, issuing commands with the calm authority of a leader who had faced threats before and would again. "2 riders only," he reminded his warriors, "but treat them as if they lead many more. We will not show fear, but neither will we reveal our full strength." Meanwhile, miles to the west, Swift Arrow and Running Fox followed the raiders' trail with single-minded focus. The tracks were clear now, 2 horses moving quickly, but not at full gallop, their riders either unaware they were being pursued or confident enough not to care. "They are not hiding," Running Fox observed grimly. "They want to be found." Swift Arrow nodded, his expression hard. "Or they believe themselves untouchable." The two Apache warriors rode in silence for another mile before Running Fox spoke again, his voice uncharacteristically reflective. "I still do not trust your white woman," he said, "but no child deserves to fall into the hands of men who take trophies from their victims." Swift Arrow glanced at his companion, surprised by this small concession. "Her children are innocent," he agreed carefully. "Whatever you think of her or me." Running Fox's gaze remained fixed on the horizon. "You loved your wife deeply," he stated. It wasn't a question. "Yes," Swift Arrow replied, the single word carrying the weight of his loss, "as did I mine." Running Fox was silent for several heartbeats. "There are wounds that never heal," Swift Arrow, "only scab over, waiting to bleed again at the slightest touch. The white woman has reopened such wounds in many of us." Swift Arrow considered this. Perhaps some wounds need to bleed again before they can truly heal. Running Fox gave him a sharp look. "Poetic words from a warrior. Night Flower's influence, no doubt." He shook his head. "But we are not poets, we are hunters, and our prey is ahead." They crested a ridge and pulled their horses up short. Below them, not half a mile distant, two riders moved steadily toward the Apache winter camp. Even from this distance, Swift Arrow could see they were heavily armed, rifles in saddle scabbards, pistols at their waists, and the glint of knives visible in boot tops. Running Fox signaled for them to dismount. They secured their horses in a grove of juniper trees and continued on foot, using the terrain for cover as they closed the distance. "We take them before they reach the camp," Running Fox whispered, "alive, if possible." "Dead if necessary." Swift Arrow nodded his agreement. They separated, each taking a different approach to flank the unsuspecting riders. At the camp, tension mounted with each passing minute. Scouts had reported the riders were less than an hour away, approaching steadily from the west. Grey Wolf ordered the camp to appear normal, cookfires burning, daily activities continuing, but with warriors strategically positioned and ready. Sarah sat in Nightflower's lodge, the hiding place prepared but not yet needed. She held Mary against her shoulder, gently patting the baby's back, while James and William lay nearby, mercifully asleep, despite the subdued commotion outside. "I should have left days ago," she whispered to Nightflower, who was calmly grinding herbs as if it were any ordinary day. "And I've brought this danger to your people." The old woman looked up, her dark eyes sharp with intelligence. "Danger always come," she replied simply. "Apache know this. Live with this." "But this danger is because of me," Sarah insisted. Nightflower set aside her mortar and pestle. "You think Apache only safe before you come?" She shook her head. "White soldiers hunt us. Other tribes sometimes fight us. Sickness, hunger, winter, all dangers. You're not special danger, Sarah Blackwood." Despite everything, Sarah smiled at the old woman's blunt assessment. There was wisdom in her words, a perspective that spanned decades of tribal history. Sarah's presence might have brought these specific raiders, but the Apache had faced threats long before her arrival and would face them long after her departure. A sudden silence fell over the camp, the unnatural quiet of collective held breath. Sarah tensed, instinctively pulling Mary closer. Nightflower rose and moved to the lodge entrance, peering out through the smallest possible gap in the covering. "They come," she said softly. Outside, the two riders entered the camp at a walk, their hands conspicuously away from their weapons, but their postures radiating dangerous confidence. The first man was tall and lean, with a weathered face and cold eyes that missed nothing as they scanned the camp. The second was shorter, stockier, with a pock-marked complexion and a perpetual sneer. Both wore trail-worn clothes and gun belts that had seen frequent use. Sarah, unable to resist, joined Nightflower at the entrance. Through the narrow opening, she caught a glimpse of the riders, and her heart nearly stopped. "Oh, it's them," she breathed, her voice barely audible. "The one in front, that's Hank Leeson. He was the leader, the one who shot Thomas." Nightflower squeezed her arm in warning to stay silent, but Sarah was already retreating deeper into the lodge, trembling with fear and rage. She knew these men, had watched them murder her husband, burn her home, destroy everything she had built. And now they had tracked her here, threatening not only her children, but the people who had sheltered them. In the center of the camp, Grey Wolf stepped forward to meet the intruders, his bearing regal despite his advanced years. Several warriors flanked him, their expressions carefully neutral. "You enter Apache land," the chief stated in accented but clear English. "Why?" Hank Leeson touched the brim of his hat in a gesture of mock respect. "Afternoon, Chief. Name's Leeson. This here's McCready. We're just passing through, looking for someone." "Who you seek?" Grey Wolf asked, his tone revealing nothing. "A woman," Leeson replied, his eyes continuing to scan the camp even as he spoke. "Blonde, pretty enough, got herself 3 little ones, widow woman, name of Blackwood, Sarah Blackwood." A ripple passed through the gathered Apache, though none spoke or moved. "Why you want this woman?" Grey Wolf pressed. Leeson's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Family matter. Her husband's cousin sent us to find her, bring her and the little ones safe to Willow Creek. Poor thing's been wandering since her husband passed. Might be lost, might be," he paused meaningfully, "might be fallen in with unfriendly types." It was a plausible story, delivered with practiced ease. But Grey Wolf had lived too long and seen too much deception to be fooled. "No white woman here," he stated flatly. "You look elsewhere." McCready, who had been silent until now, leaned forward in his saddle. "Now see here, Chief, we got information she was headed this way. If you're hiding her, you call Chief liar," Grey Wolf interrupted, his voice suddenly hard as steel. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Warriors straightened, hands moving imperceptibly closer to weapons. Women began ushering remaining children toward lodges. The pretense of normalcy evaporated. Leeson shot his companion a warning glance. Now, nobody's calling anybody a liar. We're just concerned is all." His gaze swept the camp again, lingering briefly on Nightflower's lodge where a flicker of movement might have caught his eye. "Tell you what. We'll make camp nearby for the night. If you happen to remember seeing a white woman with 3 babies, you just let us know. There's a reward in it." Grey Wolf's expression remained impassive. "Apache not need white man's money. You make camp far from here, not welcome near our people." Leeson's friendly facade slipped for just a moment, revealing something cold and reptilian beneath. Then the smile returned, tight and false. "Aye, whatever you say, Chief. We'll be moving along then." The 2 raiders turned their horses, but not before McCready's gaze fixed directly on Nightflower's lodge, his expression suddenly alert and interested. They rode out of the camp at the same unhurried pace they had entered, disappearing into the juniper trees to the east. Inside the lodge, Sarah's breath came in shallow gasps. "They know," she whispered. "They saw something. They know I'm here." Nightflower pressed a cup of herbal tea into her hands. "Drink, calm heart. Warriors watch them now. They not come back to camp." But Sarah wasn't comforted. She had seen the look in Leeson's eyes, the same calculating cruelty he had shown just before shooting Thomas. These men hadn't given up. They had merely changed tactics. "We need to run," she said, setting the tea aside and moving toward her children. "They'll come back after dark. A commotion outside interrupted her. Voices raised in alarm, the pounding of hooves, shouts of warning. Nightflower moved swiftly to the entrance. "What is it?" Sarah asked, fear making her voice sharp. Nightflower turned, her face grim. "Raiders return, many guns, many men." Sarah's blood turned to ice. Not just Leeson and McCready then. They had others waiting nearby. A larger force, coming now to take what they wanted. "The hiding place," she said, moving toward the concealed pit, quickly. But even as Nightflower helped her lift the false section of flooring, a different sound cut through the chaos outside. War cries, not from the Apache warriors, but from somewhere beyond the camp's edge. Then gunfire, sharp and staccato, followed by the unmistakable twang of bowstrings and the thud of arrows finding their marks. "Swift arrow," Nightflower said, her weathered face breaking into a rare smile. "He come!" Outside, the battle had been joined. Swift Arrow and Running Fox, having tracked and observed the two raiders leaving the camp, had discovered their true plan. A larger group of 7 men waiting in a nearby ravine, armed for slaughter rather than negotiation. The Apache warriors had acted instantly. Splitting up, they had circled around to attack the larger group from behind, just as Leeson and McCready returned to their companions. The element of surprise gave them the initial advantage, with 3 raiders falling to arrows before the others even realized they were under attack. Now Swift Arrow fought with cold precision, each movement calculated and deadly. Beside him, Running Fox was a whirlwind of lethal force, his hatred for white invaders channeled into devastating effectiveness. Despite being outnumbered, the 2 Apache warriors moved with such coordination that they seemed like many more. Leeson, recognizing the tide turning against them, shouted to McCready, "The camp! Get the woman!" The 2 men broke away, spurring their horses toward the Apache encampment while their remaining companions provided covering fire. Swift Arrow saw them go and instantly understood their intent. "The woman and children," he shouted to Running Fox. "They still go for them." Something shifted in Running Fox's expression, a decision made in the heat of battle. "Go," he commanded. "Protect them. I finish here." Swift Arrow hesitated only a fraction of a second before mounting his horse and galloping after the raiders, leaving Running Fox to face the remaining outlaws alone. It was a moment of trust neither would have thought possible days earlier. Running Fox, acknowledging the importance of Sarah's safety, Swift Arrow, trusting the war chief with his life. At the camp, Grey Wolf had organized the defense. Warriors formed a protective ring, women and children retreated to the central lodge, and the tribe prepared to make its stand. When Leeson and McCready burst from the trees, they were met with a volley of arrows that sent McCready tumbling from his saddle, an arrow lodged in his shoulder. Leeson, more skilled or simply luckier, managed to break through the outer defenses. He rode directly for Nightflower's lodge, as if guided by some predatory instinct to where his prey waited. "Sarah Blackwood!" he shouted, dismounting and drawing his pistol. "Come on out now!" "This doesn't have to get messy." Inside the lodge, Sarah had made her decision. "Stay with the children," she told Nightflower, pressing a kiss to each baby's forehead. "Keep them safe." Before the old woman could stop her, Sarah emerged from the lodge, standing tall despite the terror coursing through her veins. "I'm here, Leeson," she called, her voice steadier than she felt. "Leave these people alone." "It's me you want." Leeson turned, a cruel smile spreading across his face. Well, the widow Blackwood, been quite a chase you've led us on." "Why?" Sarah demanded. "You took everything we had. What more could you possibly want?" Leeson leveled his pistol at her. "Your husband's maps, woman, the ones showing the location of the Spanish gold. We know he found the old mission ruins." "No, he charted the canyon where the treasure's hidden." Sarah stared in genuine confusion. "What maps?" Thomas was a farmer. not a treasure hunter. "Don't play dumb," Leeson snarled. "We found his journal in your burned-out cabin. Read about the ruins, the markings he copied, but the map itself was missing." He took a step closer. "Now, where is it?" The truth dawned on Sarah with stunning clarity. Thomas had been fascinated by local history, had spent days exploring the canyons, recording his findings in his journal, but there had never been any gold, any treasure map, just the enthusiastic notes of an amateur historian. "There is no map," she said. "No gold. You killed him for nothing." Fury twisted Leeson's features. "You're lying." He cocked the pistol. "Tell me where it is, or I'll start with one of those babies of yours." "No!" Swift Arrow's voice rang out as he galloped into the clearing, bow drawn and arrow aimed directly at Leeson's heart. "Drop your weapon!" Leeson spun, firing wildly. The bullet grazed Swift Arrow's arm, but did not stop him from loosing his arrow. It struck true, embedding itself in Leeson's chest. The raider staggered, disbelief washing over his face as he fell to his knees. "The map!" he gasped, blood bubbling at his lips. "Worth fortune." "There is no map," Sarah repeated, watching without pity as the light faded from her husband's murderer's eyes. "Only justice." Leeson collapsed face forward into the dust, his blood soaking into the earth of the Apache camp. Sarah stood motionless, a strange numbness spreading through her as she watched the man who had haunted her nightmares die at her feet. Swift Arrow dismounted, moving quickly to her side. "Are you hurt?" he asked, scanning her for injuries. She shook her head, still staring at Leeson's body. "The children?" "Safe with Nightflower," he assured her. "The other raiders?" "Running Fox," she began, suddenly remembering the war chief left to face multiple enemies alone. As if summoned by his name, Running Fox appeared at the edge of the camp, bloodied but unbowed. Behind him rode Young Elk and 2 hawks, returning from their own mission. The 3 warriors bore signs of battle, but moved with the confident bearing of victors. "It is finished," Running Fox announced, dismounting heavily. "The White Killers are dead, all of them," Grey Wolf stepped forward. "And our people?" 3 wounded, none seriously," Running Fox reported. "The ancestors favored us today." The chief nodded, then turned to Sarah, who still stood as if frozen beside Leeson's body, his gaze softened fractionally. "Go to your children, Sarah Blackwood," he said. "They need their mother now." At his words, the spell broke. Sarah turned and ran back to Nightflower's lodge, where her babies waited, blissfully unaware of how close they had come to losing everything once again. Swift Arrow watched her go, then faced Running Fox. "You fought well," he said simply. The war chief studied him for a long moment. "As did you." He glanced toward Nightflower's lodge. For her and the little ones as much as for the tribe, it was as close to acceptance as Running Fox would ever offer, and Swift Arrow recognized it as such. He inclined his head in acknowledgement. "The tribe is my family," he said, "but compassion makes us stronger, not weaker." Running Fox's expression remained unreadable, but he did not contradict the younger warrior. Instead, he turned to help with the wounded, leaving Swift Arrow to stand guard outside the lodge where Sarah now held her children, her tears of relief falling softly on their innocent faces. The danger had passed, but its shadow remained, along with questions about what would happen when the 20 days were complete. The days following the battle brought a profound shift to the Apache camp. The raiders' bodies were taken far away and left for the desert creatures, their weapons and supplies divided among the tribe according to custom. The wounded recovered under Nightflower's skilled care, and gradually life resumed its normal rhythms. Yet something fundamental had changed. Sarah, once viewed with suspicion and barely tolerated, found herself the recipient of small but significant gestures. An extra portion of stew, a newly tanned deerskin for her children, nods of acknowledgement as she moved through the camp, no longer restricted to Nightflower's Lodge. The children, especially, became a bridge between worlds. Women who had lost sons and daughters to white men's bullets or diseases found themselves drawn to the triplets, innocent smiles and reaching hands. Little Mary, William, and James knew nothing of the blood-soaked history between their peoples. They responded with equal delight to Apache faces as to their mother's pale features. Swift Arrow observed these changes with quiet satisfaction, though he kept his distance from Sarah in public, mindful of the tribe's scrutiny. Only in the evenings, when he came to Nightflower's Lodge to check on them, did he allow himself to sit longer, to talk more freely, to watch Sarah with the undisguised admiration that grew stronger with each passing day. On the 18th day, 2 days before Sarah and her children were scheduled to leave for Willow Creek, Grey Wolf summoned Swift Arrow to his lodge. The chief sat cross-legged before a small fire, his face lined with the wisdom and weariness of his many winters. "You have been avoiding the question that must be answered," Grey Wolf began without preamble. "Tomorrow, you must prepare to guide the white woman and her children to their people. Yet I see in your eyes that your heart travels a different path." Swift Arrow did not deny it. "My feelings do not change my duty to the tribe," he replied carefully. Grey Wolf studied him. "Once, I too loved a woman who was not of our people. A Navajo girl, captured in a raid when I was young. I was to escort her to the trading place." A rare smile softened his weathered features. "She became my first wife instead. Bore me 3 children before the spotted sickness took her." Swift Arrow looked up in surprise. This was a story he had never heard, though he had known Grey Wolf all his life. "The heart knows no boundaries drawn by men," the chief continued, "but the world does not easily accept such unions. You would both face hardship from her people and ours." "I know this," Swift Arrow acknowledged. "I have not spoken to her of my feelings." "But she knows," Grey Wolf stated with certainty, "as does the entire camp." Swift Arrow couldn't refute this. The connection between him and Sarah had grown too obvious to hide, evident in every glance, every careful word, every moment of silence charged with unspoken emotion. "What would you have me do, my chief?" he asked finally. Grey Wolf regarded him for a long moment. "I follow the path the Great Spirit has laid before you," he said at last. "But know this, if you choose her, there will be consequences. Not all the tribe will accept your decision." "And you, my chief?" Swift Arrow asked softly. "Would you accept it?" The old man sighed, suddenly looking every one of his 65 winters. "I have lost too many sons to hate," he said. "Perhaps it is time to gain one through love instead." Swift Arrow bowed his head, humbled by the chief's wisdom and tacit blessing. "Thank you, Grey Wolf." "Do not thank me yet," the chief warned. "The hardest choices still lie ahead, for both of you." That evening, as the sun painted the western sky in hues of fire, Swift Arrow found Sarah sitting alone outside Nightflower's Lodge. The triplets slept peacefully inside, watched over by the old healer who had grown as attached to them as if they were her own grandchildren. "May I join you?" Swift Arrow asked. Sarah smiled, patting the ground beside her. "Please." They sat in companionable silence for a time, watching the sunset give way to the first stars of evening. Swift Arrow was acutely aware of her presence beside him, the faint scent of wild sage in her hair, the quiet sound of her breathing, the way her hand rested just inches from his own. Tomorrow we prepare for your journey, he said finally. 2 days until you reach your husband's brother in Willow Creek. Sarah nodded, though he sensed reluctance in the gesture. Yes, it's time. She turned to face him directly. I can never repay what you've done for us, Swift Arrow. You saved my children's lives, mine too. There is no debt between us, he replied. You would have done the same. Would I? She wondered aloud. Before all this, I'm not sure I would have risked everything to help someone so different from myself. And now? Now I understand that the differences lie on the surface, she said softly. And beneath them, we share the same heart. Swift Arrow took a deep breath, gathering his courage. Sarah Blackwood, he began formally, I must ask you something. She met his gaze steadily, her blue eyes reflecting the last light of day. Yes. If there was a way, if you could stay, would you want to? The question hung between them, weighted with implications neither had dared voice until now. Sarah didn't answer immediately, her expression thoughtful as she considered all that his words meant. My children would be outsiders, she said finally, neither fully of your world nor mine. They would be the first of something new, he countered, a bridge between peoples who have known only hatred. And you, she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, what would you be to them? To me, Swift Arrow reached out slowly, taking her hand in his. Whatever you would have me be, friend, protector. He paused. Husband, if you would accept such an offer. Sarah's eyes widened. The tribe would never allow it. Some would oppose, he acknowledged. Others would accept. Grey Wolf has given his blessing, though he warns the path will not be easy. Tears shimmered in Sarah's eyes. Nothing worthwhile ever is, she whispered. As the first stars appeared in the deepening blue of twilight, Sarah Blackwood made her choice. She leaned forward and pressed her lips gently to Swift Arrow's, a kiss that spanned the chasm between their worlds and promised a future neither had imagined possible. In the doorway of her lodge, Nightflower watched with knowing eyes, a smile crinkling her weathered face. Beside her, Running Fox stood in shadow, his expression unreadable. Yet he did not turn away from the sight of the Apache warrior, and the white woman joined in the twilight. Instead, he touched the scar on his cheek, legacy of a battle long past, and slowly nodded once before disappearing into the gathering darkness. The journey ahead would not be easy. There would be prejudice and hardship, misunderstanding and fear to overcome. But on this night, under the vast Arizona sky, a new beginning had been forged, not just for Swift Arrow and Sarah, but for the 3 small children sleeping peacefully nearby, unaware that they would grow up as living symbols of hope in a divided land. Sometimes the bravest act is not fighting for one's people, but recognizing that one's people can expand beyond the boundaries of blood and birth. Sometimes the greatest warrior is the one who lays down arms to build a bridge instead. As the stars wheeled overhead, Swift Arrow held Sarah close, feeling the beating of her heart against his. Different in origin, perhaps, but sharing the same steady rhythm of life, of hope, of possibility.